Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. I offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and to all of you, as you are Vaishnavas, and therefore you are the most worshipable in all the three worlds. Hare Krishna. Today I'm going to read a verse from the Srimad-Bhagavatam. It's 4th canto, 26th chapter. King Puranjana goes to the forest to hunt, and the text is number 21. King Puranjana said, "My dear, beautiful wife, when a master accepts a servant as his own man, but does not punish him for his offenses, the servant must be considered unfortunate." Purport: according to Vedic civilization, domestic animals and servants are treated exactly like one's children. Animals and children are sometimes punished not out of vengeance, but out of love. Similarly, a master sometimes punishes his servant, not out of vengeance, but out of love, to correct him and bring him to the right point. Thus, King Puranjana took his punishment dealt by his wife, the queen, as mercy upon him. He considered himself the most obedient servant of the queen. She was angry at him for his sinful activities, namely hunting in the forest and leaving her at home. King Puranjana accepted the punishment as actual love and affection from his wife. In the same way, when a person is punished by the laws of nature, by the will of God, he should not be disturbed. A real devotee thinks in this way. When a devotee is put into an awkward position, he takes it as the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Tate anukampam susamikshamano bhunjana evatma kritam vibhakam hridvagvapurvir vidanandamaste jiveta yom mukti padesadhaya bhak. This verse states that the devotee accepts a reversal of his position in life and as a benediction by the Lord, and consequently offers the Lord more obeisances and prayers, thinking that the punishment is due to his past misdeeds and that the Lord is punishing him very mildly. The punishment awarded by the state or by God for one's own faults is actually for one's benefit, for one's benefit. In the Manu Samhita it is said that the king should be considered merciful when he condemns a murderer to death, because a murderer punished in this life becomes freed from his sinful activity, and in the next life takes birth cleared of all sins. If one accepts punishment as a reward dealt by the master, he becomes intelligent enough not to commit the same mistake again. If one accepts punishment as a reward dealt by the master, he becomes intelligent enough not to commit the same mistake again. And this is based on the very clear framework of the Bhagavatam, that the purpose of the material universe is for refining the people here, the living entities, so that they can actually come to their ultimate refined state, which is called a devotee. When one becomes completely in tune with the will of the Lord, then one's life becomes happy. I'm unhappy because I'm out of alignment. Through proper alignment comes happiness. In fact, the word dukkha indicates that one's out of alignment just as much as the axle in a vehicle, when it's out of alignment, will create heat, friction, bumpiness, can even catch fire. So when I'm out of alignment with my real purpose, or if I don't understand what the purpose of the world is, then it's inevitable that I'll suffer. But when I have a clear idea that I'm in a universe that is overseen minutely by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is not only all-powerful, but he's also all-merciful, and that his ultimate intention is to give me more and more opportunities to enjoy life by serving him, to share his opulence, which is eternality, knowledge, and bliss, then whatever happens to such a person, that person interprets correctly that this is meant to help me come closer to that position. And of course, Prabhupada quotes the famous verse, Tate anukampam susamikshmano. The devotee is always awaiting the mercy of the Lord and seeing whatever happens as the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And whatever the apparent hardship, he or she goes on with the practice of devotional service, never stops, and is very much aware that by this, a continuance of the practice of devotional service, despite any obstacles or suffering, one will attract the complete mercy of the Lord. So much so that Brahma says in the verse that's quoted within this verse, within the purport, that such a person will inherit the kingdom of God. And therefore, one should become framed in this way. One should frame one's reality in this way, says the Bhagavatam, to understand and see the Lord's hand in our lives, that he's the one directing everything and helping us to come closer. So then comes this beautiful mantra at the end of the purport, that if we're able to take punishment as a reward of the Master, that's helping us to remember him. I'll read it exactly because it's so perfectly rendered already. And that is that if one accepts punishment as a reward dealt by the Master, he becomes intelligent enough not to commit the same mistake again. So if one has this frame of reference, that's whatever punishment I'm getting as a reward, which sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it, on its face? Someone might think, well, I'm not going to stand for that. What am I, some kind of a slave? But actually this solves the problems of life and puts one in alignment with the universe. It's only when I think that I'm the center of the world and that my plan should prevail that I become repeatedly disappointed and I suffer mentally because of that. It's much easier to find out what the Lord's intentions are, to decide once and for all that Krishna is the supreme controller and that everything's meant for his pleasure. This really sounds like slavery now, but it's the solution, actually. And it's hard to hear if we mention such things in a broader assembly. It's possible that somebody could recoil and think, how is it that I should surrender to somebody else? However, try it out and see what happens. Well, first of all, the Shastra says you've already tried it out the other way. And therefore, tato brahma jignasa, which means that therefore, because you've tried everything else, just realize this, you've tried everything else and it didn't work. Now try this. Try focusing your attention on giving your energies and your love to the Supreme Personality of God as the Supreme Controller. And you'll be quite pleasantly surprised by this way of life, by this frame of consciousness. And this is Krishna consciousness. So I'll take a few reflections before I go to the next point. Yes, Ananda?
When I'm reading the Bhagavatam, Stephanie and I actually just read through this section, and this purport really impressed me that when we view the reward as or the punishment as reward, then we become intelligent enough. And I was considering the opposite end if I view it a punishment as a punishment, or I get angry or discouraged, or I start blaming a situation, a Krishna, or whatever. how then that intelligence to actually learn the lesson becomes inaccessible to me. So it not only, in the reverse end of the spectrum, if I'm not seeing punishment as a reward, then I'm actively making myself incapable of moving through it. And so I was really just appreciating to hear this verse.
That's nice. This is one of the ways to thoroughly investigate a subject matter is look at it the opposite way. If I recoil every time something goes against my will, against my plan, then what do I learn? But if I take the lesson from the punishment, if I accept it as Krishna's mercy, it's moving me in a certain direction. A certain direction means in the direction Krishna wants me to go. If I surrender to that, and the more I give myself to Krishna's will, the more he guides me. Because he's very much aware of what my intentions are. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadami bhuti yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. This is a remarkable verse in which Krishna's indicating that the more that we turn our attention towards him in the mood of surrender, the more he gives us intelligence, how to approach him. And this Buddhi Yoga means that one becomes directly guided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This takes place by submissively reading the Bhagavad Gita, which is non-different than Krishna speaking the Bhagavad Gita at Kurukshetra. We can experience the same thing. And we can also see how Krishna's voice is becoming more pronounced in our life through the process of Buddhi Yoga, or surrendering to his direction. Other reflections? Yes?
I was just wondering, because sometimes like a punishment can be kind of separated from the initial act, like it can take place like not directly after, but kind of some ways after. And how is it that you can tell kind of like, oh, this is what I'm being punished for? Like, is there a way to kind of strengthen that knowledge? Or?
Not really. Because really, can everyone hear online? So when you pass the mic around, just try keeping it as close to your chin as possible. Because the devotees were complaining online this morning that they couldn't hear. And by the way, the light's on near Kula. We really can't, because our involvement in the material world is quite complicated. In many lifetimes, we go back a long way. And karma, the results of our past deeds, is stored up in those, those lockers you see when you're driving down the freeway? Extra storage lockers? They have them that's in there, if you ever wonder what's in there. There's so much, and it's so complicated. The Krishna mentions this in the Bhagavad Gita, that the ways of karma are very difficult to understand. But it's more our attitude towards the world. For instance, in the 15th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says, Narupam asyeha tato palabhyate nanto nacharir nachasam pratishta ashvatamenam suvarurambulam asanga shastrena dridhena chitva. It's very hard to ascertain where we even are in the world. You can't see the form. Narupam asyeha tato palabhyate. We don't know where we are. People arguing all the time now, Earth's flat, Earth's round. You can't even figure that part out. It's like, what do you think? And I say, I have no idea. I can't tell. And if you start looking around and look in the sky, try to figure out where you are, you don't know. You know where you came from in your last life. You have no idea where you're going in your next life. What to speak of figuring out the intricacies of karma. And we do find oftentimes that whatever happens to us that we interpret it in a certain way turns out to be different. And people mention this all the time. Steve Jobs at his inauguration speech, commencement speech at Stanford several years ago, said that he was amazed that the most dire circumstances in his life, turned out to be the most fortuitous. He didn't know when he got kicked out of his company that would start something even bigger. And it would actually help him to circle back and look at himself and see, why did I start this in the first place? He didn't notice it till later. But one can have a preparatory strategy. That is, that I'm always preparing myself to accept what comes as the mercy of the Lord. The devotees live in this kind of consciousness that I don't know what it is, but Krishna knows. I trust him, that he knows the right thing to do, and that Prabhupada mentions here that they accept that whatever I'm getting, whatever seems to be going against my plan that disturbs my mind, is minimized. Krishna's kindly minimized it. And when something good comes, they say, I didn't deserve it. Krishna gave me more than I deserved. On the other hand, a materialist, when something bad happens, he goes on CNN and says, there is no God, otherwise how could bad things happen to good people? And when something great happens, he says, what do you need God for? I'm so smart. I planned this all out, it happened. But the devotees think that and live as if they're completely dependent on Krishna, because they know that they are, and that he's all benevolent. If one lets oneself go into that realm, one won't be disappointed. In other words, this is being mentioned by Brahma and others, that Krishna's there to catch you. When Prahlad Maharaj was thrown over the cliff by Hiranyakashipu, Krishna reached out and grabbed him. Of course, Radhika Raman Prabhu pointed out that he caught him at the bottom. He said, why? He said, gave the opportunity during that time for him to take full shelter of the Lord. And oftentimes, these are ways in which Krishna is giving us an opportunity to take more shelter. Yes, Nirgula. Oh, Pranahari. Go ahead, you've got the mic. Tie goes to the runner. Infield fly rule. Go ahead.
I liked when you said that we try to...
Hold it really close.
We try to make our plans prevail, and then we become disappointed. Krishna has always the better plan, and you mentioned about that's what Buddhi Yoga is trying to find out what is Krishna's plan. And I was reflecting that sometimes willfully and consciously, even with knowing what Krishna's plan is, even getting that realization, that sense, and knowing that my plan is not as good and will disappoint, sometimes still willfully and consciously I choose to do my plan still. And I thought that word you used, prevail, I know Prabhupada uses the word revolt sometimes, and I think it's really interesting, like in Madhurya Kadambini, where Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions the different things when, like falling asleep during japa, getting distracted by sense gratification, different distractions to devotional service, but then one of them is just indifference. And I thought that this is really a fascinating one. It is quite a deep-rooted ignorance, which I guess, we need to take more shelter to get rid of that.
Yeah, actually, there's an author, who was a philosopher, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he said the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And we notice that this is the theme of the material world, indifference to God, indifference to the one who's actually keeping us alive, the source of our life, the soul of our soul, but I'm indifferent. And this catches here in this world, and it becomes the way that people operate, and they organize their life around this principle of being indifferent to God. In fact, in another book that I sampled, I didn't read the whole thing, but the psychologist was theorizing that everything that humans do is a way of distracting themselves from the fact that they're mortal and that they have to die. And this is the great endeavor of the person in the material world, is to be indifferent to Krishna in all his different forms. Of course, Pranahari's gone. He went back in. He can hear me, that's good. I always remember, I don't always remember, but I'm remembering now, the pastime of Kardama Muni. When Kardama Muni was meditating for 10,000 years, it was a very touching pastime, actually. It's a great yogi, and you can only imagine the rarefied atmosphere near the beginning of the universe and the greatness of these personalities who appeared to help populate the universe. In such a high state, he sat in meditation for 10,000 years. So touched was the Lord by his sacrifice that when he appeared, he shed a tear. This is the great body of water, this whole sacred place in Bindu Sarovara. The tear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead out of compassion for his devotee who sat for so long trying to make communion with him. And then Kardama offered his prayers to the Lord, who was fully visible to him. And then he said, now I know great devotees don't ask anything, but I'd like to ask you something, that I need a wife. And Lord Narayan said, yeah, I know. I know that. Why wouldn't I know that? He said, I know everything about you, I know it, and I've already arranged it. And Prabhupada mentions there that when one leaves the details of one's plans and necessities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna can make a much better arrangement. So don't interfere so much and try to have it your way. Yes, you may need something. Yes, you may ask the Lord for something. This is not the ideal of pure devotional service. Nonetheless, depend on him for whatever comes. Let him decide, because he knows much better how to make arrangements. He knows everybody, and he knows everything. And he did. He said, I've already arranged it. Devahuti will be coming. Swayambhuva Manu will bring her. And everything was arranged. Prabhupada said, how would he ever have found such a illustrious wife and family sitting in the jungle like that, unless the Lord had arranged it? So we're in a kind of jungle of the material world. And the more we learn this art of depending on the Supreme Lord and accepting what comes as his arrangement for us, knowing that he's fully aware of our intention to advance in devotional service, that the more we'll feel protected and satisfied. Although at some point it may be challenging. The devotee who was sitting right there, what was her name? Brittany, who brought that up. It's an important point, because I'm obviously summarizing this and saying that it's all good, but it may not seem all good at first. And that's why we talk about it, to prepare ourselves for such things. So, yes, one more. Oh yes, and online first. Thank you, sorry.
This is from Divyangi. I've noticed that it has a very interesting effect to tell people while on book distribution how many lifetimes we've tried to get happiness, and we always fail while trying different things. So why don't you try to read this book, and it will actually give you satisfaction. And people start to think right away, and most of the time they take the book. I find it very helpful to tell some people this information, even though I was afraid to talk so straight to people before. Thank you for mentioning this point, that we always look for real happiness and cannot find.
Can you say again exactly what she says to them? We should memorize that.
We've tried to get happiness and we always fail.
We've tried to get happiness, but we always fail.
How many lifetimes have we tried to get happiness?
How many lifetimes have we tried to get happiness?
And we always fail.
And we always fail.
While trying different things.
While trying different things.
So why don't you try to read this book instead?
So why don't you try to read this book instead?
So you will actually get satisfaction.
So you'll actually get satisfaction. Thank you, Divyangi. We'll try it out. Everyone, homework, at least try that one time and see how it goes when you go out on book distribution. Okay? we can extract that and post it up so you can have the mantra. Great.
So Prabhu, thank you. I just had a question when you were talking about when we leave the details of one's arrangement into Krishna's hands and he can make better arrangements. I was wondering if there's like a little bit more unpacking of that statement in terms of like how do we know when we're like, what if we don't have faith but we're just doing it, or what if we're leaning more towards just kind of being lazy? You know, like Srila Prabhupada talks about like Rishabdev having laid down and received everything, like Python, and he was saying that like only somebody on that platform can do that, but one must work in order to gain the thing, their sustenance.
Right. So when we see the activities of great souls like the Python, we can follow in their footsteps. We shouldn't imitate. Prabhupada points this out about Dhruva Maharaj and others. Try to follow in their footsteps. What is the spirit behind it? In the Gita, Krishna says, Yadrisha labasantushto. Practice being satisfied with gain that comes of its own accord. That's something that we can do. Yadrisha means something just comes to us. Of course, something might just not come to you. Prahlad Maharaj says this too. Tasyaiva heto prayate kovido nalabhyate yad pramatam uparyata talabhyate dukavaranyata sukham kalena sarvatra gabhira ramhasa. He said, don't try so hard in the material world for getting a comfortable position, because please notice that you don't try so hard for bad things to come, but they come anyway, right? Say yes. Okay. And so, he said, so similarly, good things will come of their own accord also. So at least you should notice that no matter how you try. So Prahlad Maharaj says, Balasya neha sharanam pitaro nashingham nartasya chaganam udhambati najato now. Taptasya tat pratividir yarihanjicheshtas tavad bibo tanubitam twadupekshitadam. Says that a boat on water can't save a drowning man, a medicine can't save a patient, and parents can't save their children unless the Lord sanctions it. And in the purport, probably gives the answer to your question. He says it's not that parents shouldn't try to save their children. It's not that you shouldn't try to save a drowning man with a boat, and it's not you should neglect medicine because Krishna will save me. No, take the medicine. But even in Ayurveda, before you take medicine, you're always supposed to say a mantra that says, this medicine won't work unless Vishnu sanctions it. And so with whatever we do, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati used to say, when he'd say, they'd say, are you going to the Mela? And he'd say, I'm going, Krishna willing. I'm doing, Krishna willing. Being aware that I'm doing, but it's Krishna willing. So Prabhupada says, of course, you'll do your best to complete your duty in ordinary circumstances, but you should always have the awareness that it won't be completed unless Krishna sanctions it. And if he doesn't sanction it, it doesn't go your way, then take it that there's some bigger plan. This is enlightened consciousness, according to the Bhagavatam. It's the quintessential attitude of the devotee who's depending on Krishna, seeing which way he goes. Of course, it's not always easy. Prabhupada said when he was trying to execute the order of his spiritual master and things started going the other way, for instance, when he had a business that was supposed to make enough money to finance spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, and it failed, and when Prabhupada had taken sannyas and he was by himself, and then he got thrashed by a cow with long horns, and he was lying on the footpath, Prabhupada said, I was thinking, what is this? Krishna, what is this? And you can imagine. So, however, it may not come instantaneously, but the way we process everything is coming back towards this. And of course, you hear later Prabhupada speaking on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disappearance day, after he had successfully spread the movement around the world. And obviously, he went on depending on Krishna, despite the fact that there were setbacks, and depending on him, he was able to do miraculous things. And then he said, who knew how these things would all happen? And he saw how they were all Krishna's arrangement. After all, how different it might have been if he hadn't have come to America bereft of all his possessions. No followers, no money, no nothing. So was it Krishna's arrangement that he came like that? Obviously. It was obvious to Prabhupada. So a couple more points about ways in which to position oneself in this world so that one can come to the perfection of life, which is to be a surrendered servant of the Lord and to commune directly with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One of the ways in which Rupa Goswami says we should conduct ourselves daily is by inspirational sadhana. That means that every day we should get some inspiration from our sadhana. This is called niyamagraha. It's illegal to practice sadhana without trying for this. Be responsible for your own ecstasy in one way. I know that's opposite of what we say oftentimes, but the idea is that you should put yourself in your sadhana in such a way that you're fully open to receive the gifts that Krishna will pass down to you. Tushta Prabhu and I were talking today about, Tushta was saying that on the times when he goes deeply within his sadhana and is able to get that even molecule of inspiration from his sadhana, because he tries for it, he prays for it, and works diligently to get it, to put himself in a position where he can receive the grace that Krishna is passing down, then the rest of whatever he does during the day is guided by that. I once asked Radhanath Maharaj about management, because I was getting into management against my better judgment, and I said, this is really harsh, and it's hard, and there's so many complications and intractable situations. Have you ever had an intractable situation? A decision where there's a temple president, where no matter what you decided, it was the wrong choice, and people were going to hate you for it? Ever had that happen? If not, we've got a position for you. Got positions open. So, I said it's very difficult, and like, how do you go on without getting ground down by this? And he said, the guiding principle for management. He said, you have to have some kind of bliss in your life. Unless you're blissful, he said it's your main duty to be somehow or other remain blissful. And the only way to do that is actually to have inspirational sadhana. And if you don't, then no matter what you do in life, whether it's manage or do some other services, or even if you are working in the world, doing some karma yoga, whoever you are, wherever you may be, if you don't have this inspirational sadhana, then you're at the mercy of the material energy. And it will devour you. So our protection is from the internal potency, and that comes from our direct contact with Krishna. So inspirational sadhana means take full advantage of the practices that you already have. You don't need extra things. You don't need extra books. You don't need extra mantras. You don't need another place. You don't need another guru. You're okay. Just take what you have and take full advantage of the situation that you're in now. And if you do, Krishna's close at hand. And he's fully aware that you have your hand out. Did you ever give to a beggar? Why?
Yes.
Because he had his hand out. She had his hand out. It's like, give me something. And like, if they didn't ask, if they just walked by the window, you wouldn't have even thought of it. But if they go like this, give me, give me, give me, after a while you go, all right, I'll give you. It's like, why'd you give me? You asked me. So if you don't ask, you don't get. Ask for it. Beg for it. In fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says this twice in his song, Jeev Jago. He says, you have to beg for the holy name. He said, beg for this mantra and get it. He said, I begged for it and I got it. So if you want real success in your sadhana, then really beg and the harder you beg, and the more needy you are, the hungrier you are for it, then the more you'll feel Krishna's grace and the more open you are to receive it. People have spread religious processes all over the world, but people haven't been able to take it. It's one thing to try to give it, it's another thing for people to take it. In fact, you read all the time. I just, read historical accounts of the conflict between the Jews in Jerusalem and the Romans, and the fights over the various ways of worship and so forth, and imposing various religious processes often results in bloodshed. Take it or we'll kill you. So taking is not so easy, but that's our main job in our sadhana, is to prepare ourselves to take. In fact, in the beginning of the 7th canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the question Parikshit Maharaj asked Sukadeva Goswami is, why does it seem like Krishna is preferential, gives preferential treatment to some people, like the demigods, and he neglects the demons? And Sukadeva says, no, it's not like that at all. He's not preferential. Actually, what's going on is some people are more qualified to receive the mercy that's coming in. And really, our success in devotional service has to do with how we prepare ourselves to receive Krishna's unlimited mercy. After all, Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu, Dinabandho Jagatpate. He's the ocean of mercy and he's the friend of the poor. That ought to qualify anybody. So if you put yourself in that position and work on yourself internally that I have to be prepared for this. And every day becomes an exciting day because you might get that molecule of mercy. People think of that in material terms, they might win the super lotto. This might be the day I get, $1 trillion by, scratching off a ticket. And the devotees think like that. This might be the day that I can get that one molecule of mercy from Krishna. So they wake up early, take a bath, clear their eyes, and move everything else out of the way, and they try for it. This is inspirational sadhana. Niyamagraha means don't waste it. Don't waste your sadhana. Chaitanya, the great Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, says it's just like with japa. If you don't pay attention and you don't try to get mercy, he says like you sign up for a gym and you go there to lift weights and get yourself healthy. So you go in and you try lifting a few times and you go, that's heavy. And also, I start sweating and everything when I lift all these weights, so I'll go to the gym. I'll just, instead of lifting the weight, I'll just move my arms. So I can also go through the sadhana and just show up, but I'm not really there. I'm not trying, I'm not opening myself to try to get inspiration from it. I'm not trying to get that one molecule of mercy coming down from Krishna. So if you try for it, Krishna keeps saying over and over again, it's there, I'll give it. But make yourself ready for it. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, be very, very humble. Krishna says the same thing in the Gita. If you want knowledge, if you want the key to everything in the universe, it starts with two things. Amanitvam, adambitvam, humility and pridelessness. And prepare yourself like that. Counterintuitive again. It's not the approach where I try to pry it out of the universe with a crowbar, but I avail myself to it by my humble mentality and my humility. And the third thing is a trademarked item called VLCs. The voluntary life changes. Make a list, know what the voluntary life changes that you might make are that will help you in your devotional practice. What might they be? If you go on doing what you've done in the past and you're not aware of the opportunities you might have to change your life, then you might miss something. But be very aware of the voluntary life changes that you can make, and then even if they're tiny, make them now, as soon as possible. Cheat death before death cheats you. Take advantage preemptively of the opportunity you have before it's taken away from you, because if it's taken away, then you just look like a fool. Hey, you missed it. How come you missed it? I was late. It's like, well, you're an idiot. So if you If somehow or other you're able to define what the voluntary life changes are, and you say, okay, I'm going to make them now. I'll do it before somebody asks me to do it. I'll do it before I'm forced to do it. I'll do it before it's too late. Then you have a life. That's real life. That means you're using your free will. And when you're using your free will to surrender to Krishna, then it's a whole nother universe. The universe changes right before your eyes, and you're looking at something nobody else can see, which is Krishna. He's right there behind every activity, every movement in your life, the changing of the seasons, everything is happening by Krishna's mercy. So these three things we talked about tonight. One was to accept punishment as a reward dealt by the Master. If one can get into that mentality, one becomes a wise person and avails oneself to the mercy of the Lord. If one also takes advantage of inspirational sadhana, find out what the most valuable kinds of practice are, and then major in those things. Don't major in minor things. What are the minor things? Chatting on Facebook about the topics that will never be resolved from this level of consciousness. That is not just a minor thing. It's actually you get a demerit for that. And then there are things that actually, after you go above that, you can start to get into the minor things. Forget the minor things. We don't have time. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave 64 items of devotional service. It said, but here's a neat package of 5. You just take this 5-pack and you're set. You stay close to this and you're okay. Find out what the major things are and then invest in it as much as you can. And then finally, the VLCs. Find out what the voluntary life changes are that you can make. And it doesn't mean you have to imitate anybody else. You don't have to be like anybody else. You're you. You have your own unique set of circumstances and qualifications for taking the devotional service. So find out what you can do right now, even if it's tiny, and then make the change before it is the opportunity is taken away from you. Yes. Here comes the microphone. Well, that's okay. You don't have to. Except that the devotees online can't hear you unless you do. Is it all right?
I really like the way Krishna gives punishment.
She really liked the way, you really like the way that Krishna gives you punishment.
And then I know him more.
And then you know him more.
Because of that.
Because of that.
And I'm happy.
And then you're happy. Thank you. That was a neat summary of the first part. Yes?
I like the second part, how it connects to the first part. The first part is that everything that's happening to us is an opportunity for a lesson for us to grow from Krishna. And the second part of how sadhana can actually, how we can create inspirational sadhana for ourselves. It reminds me how that sadhana is like that tool that unlocks that mentality for every cool punishment being a lesson, and how growing is painful and uncomfortable, yet it's inevitable. So to kind of, I guess, that's something to me, Reggie, to be in that uncomfortable place.
Yeah, that's something we've talked about before. Learn to be comfortable outside your comfort zone and feel uncomfortable in your comfort zone. Comfort zone means that I'm finding what's convenient and cozy. Doesn't mean to live an unbalanced life or to wear a horsehair shirt. It means to avail yourself to the opportunities that Krishna has given and stay out of the realm of trying to be comfortable through the material senses. And also, you mentioned sadhana. It's a magical word. And every sadhya goal has its sadhana. And if you learn, they go together like lock and key. And if you learn what the sadhana is, tat karma pravartana, there are various activities recommended, highly recommended. Find out what they are and then invest in it. And sadhana is so powerful that when you give yourself to it, then gradually you'll see your own improvement. You'll become encouraged. And if you don't, then what do you expect? Right? It was a popular song. I don't know what you expect, staring into the TV set. I mean, if you're not practicing, if you're looking somewhere else, then what will be the results? Nothing, except for more confusion. Okay, a couple more. Yes?
I was appreciating this point of taking advantage of what we have and sadhana, because I was remembering something I read recently in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There was a Muslim king or prince of some kind, and he was known to be a drunkard and unreliable, and he was controlling an area of land that Mahaprabhu was going to pass to. So the devotees were saying, okay, let's camp out here, we'll send a party, we'll make a treaty with him so he can pass through. But just by hearing about Mahaprabhu, he became changed. He came over and he surrendered, and he said, I don't know what I did to get such a degraded birth. I should have been born in a family that I felt like associating with you. I'm so fallen. I don't know what to do. I need your mercy. And Mahaprabhu glanced at him with his mercy and gave him reassuring words and said, chant Hare Krishna. And I was thinking, reading that, boy, it would be really nice to have Mahaprabhu glance at me. And then Prabhupada says in the purport, Mahaprabhu's mercy means giving somebody the qualification to chant Hare Krishna. If you are asked to chant Hare Krishna, if you have the holy name, you have received Mahaprabhu's mercy. And it was like a thunderbolt. So the principle that it's actually there, it's present in my life. Am I taking advantage of it?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And in closing, important to remember also that whatever you're doing now, the very fact that you're showing up and you're doing what you can is highly exalted. Oftentimes we can think about how far away I am from the goal and how I'm debilitated in so many ways. But you can also notice that it's an empowered activity. First of all, just to become a human is a big deal, because there are 8,400,000 species of life. And we discovered something very delightful in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. Out of all the species of life, Krishna likes the humans. So if you're human, cheer up. Krishna likes you. Then, if you're a human, Manushanam Sahasreshu Kashid Yatati Siddhaye, it's very rare for any human to actually inquire about spiritual life, rarer still for one to come to a very clear idea about there being a supreme God who's a person. I mean, that's practically impossible unless you get mercy of a pure devotee. You can't know that just by speculation. And if you come to that point, you're in an even more rarefied situation. And if you're chanting Hare Krishna, that's empowered. Whatever you're doing to chant right now, whatever level you're chanting on, is an empowered activity. And it's really advanced. So also take heart in the fact that you've come so far and you're in exalted company with the Shastras, with the devotees who are following the Parampara. And you're already lined up. Those who are lined up through the Krishna consciousness movement, it's amazing how much credit you get just for being lined up properly. For instance, when Bali Maharaj was given great mercy by Vamandev, everybody wanted to know, hey, how'd that work out? He just, knocked over the whole heavenly planets and took it over with his demoniac forces. And then Vishnu comes along and gives him so much mercy that nobody could even imagine. And Sanatana Goswami gives one of the answers in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and that's because he's related to Prahlad Maharaj. And goes on to say that it's not what we are or what we do, but who we know that's most important, who we're connected with in devotional service. So if you just connect yourself to the devotees and just say, hey, I'm with them, that's a huge qualification. And by that alone, great mercy comes. So we can also be encouraged and cheered up by that. And I thank everybody very much for all that you're doing to help the world by chanting Hare Krishna and helping spread the Krishna consciousness movement, or just doing it yourself. And Gaur Premanande. Nitai Gaura Haribo, Haribo. Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.